The animal kingdom is a world filled with wonder and mystery. According to many scientists, animals in both the natural world and captivity display some strange behaviors that we simply don't understand. Many of these animals also have incredibly unique appearances that amaze us and leave us speechless. In today's video, we'd like to take a look at some of the most bizarre, inexplicable, extraordinary phenomena in the animal kingdom. From beastly to beautiful, prepare for some highly unusual animals. Before we jump into it, let us know about the strangest animal you've ever seen. Where did you spot this creature, and what made it so unique? Let us know in the comments. Polar bears in sheep's clothing. Have you ever watched a peaceful flock of sheep graze? The sight of these fluffy, four-legged friends immediately fills us with a pleasant feeling of relaxation that is only best given to us when we're exposed to natural beauty unlike anything else. When a group of boat tourists in the Russian Arctic saw a particularly large flock of sheep on the shore, they immediately pulled out their cameras to capture this extraordinary scene on film and video. However, as the tourists grew closer to the shore, an uneasy feeling began to arise in the pits of their stomachs. As it turned out, the supposed group of sheep was not a collection of peaceful grazers at all, rather a horde of around 200 adult polar bears. The bears had all gathered around to devour a bowhead whale that had washed up on the coast. Needless to say, the tourists were both shocked and astonished at what they had just seen. Even though the tourists were surprised by what they saw, this was still a very interesting sight to behold. This moment served as a very pivotal time for many polar bears in the area. As the weather around them had begun to warm and melt away the ice, the polar bears were driven out of their natural habitat and left with very little food to survive on. This meant that many of the bears would gather in one place and fight over the small amounts of food that remained. Even though this must have been a beautiful sight to behold, it was a very sobering reminder of how the changing of our planet's poles has been devastating to many of the animals and wildlife in the world around us. The monster of St. Augustine. It isn't too uncommon for scientists to be left speechless when they encounter a new animal or creature that they simply cannot identify. Over the years, there have been many strange beings that have washed ashore on lakes, beaches, or rivers around the world, and researchers have had no idea what sort of animal could have produced such an unusual carcass. Many times, in popular media, when this happens, the creature is simply referred to as a monster, until scientists are able to definitely identify where the creature came from. One of the most famous of these discoveries must be the monster of St. Augustine. This strange animal was discovered in the fall of 1896 when two children came across the disgusting carcass of the animal on a coastline in Florida. A researcher named Dr. DeWitt decided to take the case on immediately, but he soon realized he had bitten off much more than he could chew. He did his best to identify the animal, but he had no idea what he had just come across. The creature was estimated to be about 7 meters long and weighed about 7 tons. The question about what the sea monster truly was would continue to keep scientists scratching their heads for decades. At first, many researchers felt that the animal must have been some sort of octopus. However, this idea was later rejected. In the years after this, experts felt like the monster may not have been a monster at all. Rather, they thought it could have been the remnants of fat that had fallen off of a deceased whale. Even after all these years, scientists still have no idea what this strange mass was. They have once again rejected the idea that it's the body part of another animal, and most scientists still believe that it must be some strange form of octopus. Exploding toads. What took place back in 2005 in the springtime around a small pond in Hamburg is, without a doubt, one of the strangest and most unbelievable phenomena to have ever taken place in the animal kingdom. As fate would have it, more than 1,000 toads simply burst in the air without a moment's notice. For many years, scientists had no idea what could have caused this. Some people wondered if this was some strange natural phenomenon or if somebody had poisoned the toads. But scientists quickly got to work to get to the bottom of this mystery. To best understand what happened here, scientists needed to take a look at the courtship and sexual behaviors of most common toads. When a male toad wants to impress a female toad, they'll usually puff up their bodies to make themselves appear to be as large as possible. This is what led to one major theory by scientists, who felt as though the toads must have been puffing themselves up to impress a female, yet they somehow all puffed themselves up far beyond the limits until they eventually burst. This theory didn't seem to make much sense, though. So, some scientists began to wonder if it could have been the result of a strange form of bacteria in the water. Though, as fate would have it, the explanation was far simpler than anyone could have expected. They soon found out that the exploding toads were the result of crows. The birds were found to have been flying overhead when they would swoop down and peck the livers out of the toads. The toads had been being attacked by crows for many months, yet they still managed to survive without their livers. The liver of a toad helps the toad to regulate the amount of air in its lungs. Therefore, without a liver, the toads simply inflated themselves until they burst. It's terrifying to think about, but this is the world we live in. When Chinese softshell tortoises escape. Just like any other animal in the world, tortoises need to relieve themselves every once in a while to stay healthy. However, back in 2012, a team of researchers discovered a new type of softshell tortoise that was unlike anything they'd ever seen. Somehow, over the course of their years on Earth, these turtles had developed the ability to urinate from their mouths. This was unlike anything that had ever been seen in the animal kingdom before, and researchers could not understand how an animal had developed such a strange ability. The researchers never fully understood why the turtles would have needed to do such a thing in the wild, but they came up with a theory that's so crazy it just may be true. As they examined the turtles, they put them near the edge of a small body of water to see how they would react when both drinking water and expelling it. Their best guess is that the turtles developed this ability to limit the amount of salt water that enters their bodies. In normal circumstances, when a tortoise urinates in salt water, a small amount of this water can find its way back into the turtle's body. However, if the turtle urinates from its mouth, virtually no salt enters its body, protecting its organs from potential salt damage. We don't know if this is exactly the reason why these turtles would have developed such an ability over time, but it seems to be the best guess by most researchers. The truth is, the animal kingdom is filled with mysteries that we may simply never understand. However, one thing is for sure. I'm sure most of us are glad that we're not close relatives to this tortoise and that we can continue to relieve ourselves in a much more normal way. Carnivorous sponge. Who would have thought that a simple sponge would be able to be a predator and feast on the flesh of other animals? Certainly not the scientists who discovered the world's first carnivorous sponge a few years ago. What at first may look like a beautiful underwater chandelier is actually a deadly sponge that was discovered off the coast of California's Monterey Bay. The appearance of this strange sponge eventually led to it being known as the harp sponge. It bears a striking resemblance to a certain stringed instrument, but trust me, this sponge is far more dangerous than your average harp. As I'm sure most of you are aware, sea sponges are typically filter feeders. This means that they do not have mouths or other appendages like many deep-sea creatures. Rather, they feed by filtering bacteria and other tiny organisms through their flesh, absorbing the nutrients from these materials and expelling whatever they don't need. This is true for almost every type of sea sponge. However, this creepy sponge takes things a step further and preys on adult crustaceans. The sponge will hunt down crustaceans and use its barbed tentacles to attack its prey. It will then absorb the nutrients from its prey by feasting on its flesh, using its microscopic barbs to tear through the flesh of its next meal. However, things got even stranger when scientists continued to research these strange animals, as they soon learned the barbed tentacles not only help these sponges to capture their next meal, but also to procreate. Yes, these deadly extremities are used to mate with other sponges to produce offspring. Talk about a terrible one-night stand. That sounds brutal. Blue dogs. Dogs are widely known to come in a large variety of colors. In the wild, you can see dogs that range from countless shades of brown to white to black, gray, yellow, and even red. Many dogs are even a mix of all the natural colors of the animal kingdom, leading to some very unique markings and spots on many breeds. However, have you ever seen a blue dog? This may sound like science fiction, but blue dogs do exist in some parts of the world, predominantly in India. When looking at photos of these beautiful four-legged friends, a natural question is to ask if someone has dyed the fur of this innocent animal. However, the more likely assumption is that someone applied a filter to the photo, though this is not true either. In fact, many blue dogs are known to live near Mumbai. Scientists soon learned that the dog's fur color began to shift as they were constantly exposed to industrial byproducts from the nearby manufacturing plants. We don't know for sure what has caused their fur to change colors so dramatically, but the main theory is that the dogs had been drinking wastewater from a nearby factory that had been dumping into a river. This wastewater is incredibly dangerous and is often laced with chemical cleaners that have been used to clean equipment at the end of each business day. Though things get even stranger from here. Animal rights activists were incredibly concerned for the health of the dogs, and rightfully so. They captured a few of the animals and brought them in for testing, but they soon found out that the dogs were perfectly healthy. Their fur showed no signs of contamination, and their bodies' natural processes were working as they should. Though after giving the dogs a series of baths, the blue tint to their furs simply washed off. The researchers never completely understood what caused the dog's fur to become blue, but it seems like the water they had been drinking was likely quite safe, even if it did contain trace amounts of chemical cleaners. Mike the Headless Rooster. It's not too uncommon for a chicken to run around after having its head removed. This is a natural reaction that's caused by the animal's nerve cells responding to trauma. It only lasts for a few moments before the chicken's body calms down once more, and the animal's remains are finally laid to rest, often on a kitchen table for a suburban family dinner. However, the story of Mike the Headless Rooster is much more interesting. As it would turn out, Mike had his head chopped off, but he continued to live for another 18 months. A farmer had removed the rooster's head for slaughter, but the rooster never calmed down after being decapitated. Instead, after flailing around for a while, he began to walk around as usual once more. The farmer kept the rooster alive by pouring feed down its esophagus and giving it water every once in a while. By no means was this a humane life for the rooster to live, and it should have been put out of its misery much sooner. But it seems as though the man's axe had not fully severed the rooster's cerebellum, meaning it was still able to live and function as normal for more than a year before passing away.